I never imagined my life would take such a drastic turn. For 10 years, I thought I had the perfect marriage with Richard. We were the envy of our friends, successful professionals with a beautiful house and plans to start a family. But routine gradually settled in, like an unwanted guest who comes to stay. At first, I tried to ignore the feeling of emptiness growing inside me. I told myself it was normal, that all marriages went through phases like this, but each day it became harder to fake a smile when Richard came home. Our conversations had become superficial, limited to work topics or planning grocery shopping. It was then that I started getting more involved in the family gatherings organised by my in-laws. Initially, I did it as a desperate attempt to save my marriage, thinking that spending more time with Richard's family would help us reconnect. But fate had other plans for me. At one of those dinners, I found myself chatting animatedly with Michael, Richard's father. I had always seen him as a pleasant man, but that night I discovered a side of him that captivated me. His charisma and energy contrasted so much with the monotony in which my life was submerged that I couldn't help feeling attracted. Our friendship began innocently. We shared funny anecdotes, talked about books and movies. Michael made me laugh like I hadn't in a long time. I felt alive again, as if someone had lit a spark inside me, but that spark soon turned into an uncontrollable fire. I don't know exactly when our relationship crossed the line, but when I realised it, I was already deeply involved in an affair with my father-in-law. We met in secret, taking advantage of any opportunity that presented itself. Sometimes it was a quick getaway during lunch. Other times we invented excuses to meet. Each encounter was a mix of adrenaline and guilt that left me breathless. The guilt was eating me up inside. Every time I looked Richard in the eye, I felt like I was betraying him in the worst possible way. But at the same time, I couldn't deny the excitement I felt every time I received a message from Michael. It was as if I were living two parallel lives, and I didn't know how to reconcile them. Richard began to notice changes in my behaviour. I became more distant, more nervous. I tried to compensate by being more attentive at home, but I think that only increased his suspicions. He started attending family events more frequently, as if trying to catch me in something. The tension grew day by day. Michael and I knew we were playing with fire, but neither of us seemed capable of ending our relationship. We told ourselves we would do it soon, that it would be the last time, but we always found an excuse to see each other again. Everything exploded at Richard's mother's 60th birthday celebration. The whole family was gathered at my in-laws' house. I was nervous, aware that Michael and I would have to pretend normalcy in front of everyone. Richard wouldn't stop watching me, which increased my anxiety. At one point during the party, I slipped away to Michael's study under the pretext of looking for a book he had recommended. He followed me a few minutes later. It was a huge mistake. In our desperation to be together, we let our guard down. Richard found us passionately kissing. The sound of the door suddenly opening startled us. When I saw the expression of shock and pain on my husband's face, I knew everything was over. What followed was chaos. Richard started shouting, accusing us of being traitors. The noise attracted the rest of the family. Within minutes, the whole house was filled with screams, tears, and accusations. I saw my mother-in-law's face crumble as she understood what was happening. Richard's siblings looked at me with a mixture of disgust and contempt. I tried to explain myself, but what could I say? There was no possible justification for what I had done. Michael tried to calm the situation, but only managed to make it worse. His wife slapped him in front of everyone, yelling that he was a disgrace. I left that house feeling that my world had collapsed. In a matter of minutes, I had lost my husband, my in-laws, and any respect I might have had for myself. The following days were hell. Richard refused to talk to me, communicating only through his lawyer. My calls to Michael went unanswered. I heard through others that his wife had kicked him out of the house and that his children refused to speak to him. The divorce was quick and painful. Richard was so hurt and angry that he didn't want to negotiate anything. I left our house with just the clothes on my back, leaving behind 10 years of my life. My reputation was in tatters. The friends we had in common turned their backs on me. Even my own family, though trying to support me, couldn't hide their disappointment and shame at my actions. I moved to a small apartment on the other side of the city, trying to escape the gossip and accusing looks. But no matter where I went, guilt followed me like a shadow. I spent months plunged into a deep depression. I barely ate, barely slept. I relived over and over the events that had led me to that point, torturing myself with what-ifs that no longer made sense. It was at my lowest point when I decided I had to do something. I couldn't keep sinking into self-pity. I needed to find a way to redeem myself, to make some sense of all the pain I had caused. I started looking for ways to help others. That's how I discovered a help centre for women in crisis. At first, I only volunteered a couple of hours a week. I did administrative work, nothing that involved dealing directly with the women seeking help. I didn't feel worthy of advising anyone. But little by little, as I got more involved in the centre's work, I started to feel that I was doing something valuable. I met women who had been through much worse situations than mine, and who, even so, found the strength to move forward. One of the centre's counsellors, Martha, became my mentor and friend. It was she who encouraged me to share my story. At first, I resisted. How could I, who had caused so much pain, pretend to help others? But Martha insisted. She told me that my experience could serve as a warning, that it could help other women think twice before making the same mistakes I did. With a lot of fear, I started participating in support groups. The first time I told my story in public, I was shaking so much I could barely speak. I expected to see judgment and condemnation in the eyes of the other women, but instead I found understanding and empathy. Sharing my experience was cathartic. For the first time, I could look at my actions head-on, without excuses or justifications. I talked about the loneliness I felt in my marriage, about how the excitement of the affair blinded me to the consequences of my actions. As I told my story over and over again, I began to better understand my own motivations. I didn't justify what I had done, but I began to forgive myself. I understood that, although I had made a terrible mistake, that didn't define me as a person. My work at the centre became my anchor. Every woman I could help, every life I could touch in some positive way, was one more step on my path to redemption. Over time, I trained as a counsellor. I wanted to be better prepared to help the women who came to the centre. I studied psychology, specialising in couple and family therapy. Every book I read, every course I took, helped me not only to be better at my job, but also to understand myself better. One day, almost 3 years after the scandal that destroyed my life, I received an unexpected call. It was Richard. My heart raced when I heard his voice. He told me he wanted to see me, that we needed to talk. We met at a neutral cafe. Richard had changed. He looked thinner, with some premature grey hair. He told me he had been in therapy, working on his pain and anger. He wasn't looking for reconciliation, he clarified, but felt he needed to close that chapter of his life. We talked for hours. I apologised to him, over and over again, for the harm I had caused. He listened in silence, nodding from time to time. He told me what it had been like for him to discover the affair, the pain and humiliation he felt. His words pierced me like knives, but I knew I needed to hear them. At the end of our conversation, Richard told me something I'll never forget. "I can't forgive you yet, Anna, but I'm working on it, and I'm glad to see that you're working on yourself too." Those words were like a balm for my wounded soul. They didn't erase what I had done, but they gave me hope. Hope that someday, maybe, I could be forgiven. I left that cafe feeling lighter than I had in years. For the first time, I felt that I could really look to the future without the weight of my past crushing me. My relationship with Michael never recovered. The last I heard of him was that he had moved to another city, trying to rebuild his life away from the family he had betrayed. Sometimes I wondered how he was doing, if he had found the peace that I was beginning to find, but I knew it was better to keep that door closed forever. Over time, my work at the help centre became my passion and my purpose. I developed a special program for women who had been through situations similar to mine. I taught them about the importance of communication in relationships, how to recognise warning signs in a relationship, and above all, about the importance of valuing oneself. Every time I shared my story, I saw in the eyes of these women the same pain, the same guilt that I had felt. And every time one of them found the strength to forgive herself and move on, I felt that a small part of my own guilt vanished. It wasn't an easy road. There were days when guilt threatened to drown me again, days when I wondered if I really deserved a second chance. But in those moments, I clung to Martha's words. We all make mistakes, Anna. What matters is what we do afterward. 5 years after the day that changed my life, I published a book about my experience. It wasn't an attempt to justify myself, but to offer a sincere warning about the consequences of infidelity. I spoke openly about the pain I had caused, about how a wrong decision could destroy not only a marriage, but an entire family. The book generated controversy, as expected. There were those who accused me of trying to profit from my mistake, of seeking fame at the expense of the pain I had caused. But I also received messages from people saying that my story had opened their eyes, that it had made them reconsider their own actions. One afternoon, while I was signing copies of my book at a local bookstore, a woman approached me. For a moment, my heart stopped. It was Richard's mother, my former mother-in-law. I prepared for the worst. I expected reproaches, maybe even for her to slap me right there, in front of everyone. But what happened left me speechless. She hugged me. It was a brief hug, but full of emotion. When she pulled away, I saw tears in her eyes. I've read your book, she told me. I can't say I've completely forgiven you, but I want you to know that I appreciate your honesty and your effort to redeem yourself. Those words meant more to me than any professional success I had achieved in recent years. It was a small step towards reconciliation, not only with my former family, but with myself. As the years passed, my life found a new balance. I never remarried. I felt I needed to be alone to really know and value myself, but that didn't mean I was alone. I had built a network of friends and colleagues who supported me and loved me for who I was, with all my flaws and past mistakes. My work at the help centre continued to be the centre of my life. Over time, I became the director of the programme I had created. Each year, I saw dozens of women pass through our doors, each with their own story of pain and regret. And each year I saw many of them leave stronger, more confident in themselves. One day, as I was preparing a talk for a group of college students on ethics in relationships, I received an email that took my breath away. It was from Richard. He told me he had remarried, that he had a young daughter. And then came the words I never thought I'd read. I've forgiven you, Anna. It took me a long time, but I finally understood that forgiveness was more for me than for you. I hope you've found peace. I cried as I read those words. I cried for the pain I had caused, for the lost years, but also out of relief and gratitude. Richard's forgiveness was a gift I didn't think I deserved, but one I accepted with all my heart. That night, as I prepared for bed, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I saw a woman who had made terrible mistakes, but who had found the strength to get up and try to do something good with her life. I saw someone who had learned the hardest lesson of all, that our actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences affect the people we love the most. I reflected on the long road I had travelled since that fateful day at the birthday party. I had lost so much: my marriage, my in-laws, friends, my reputation. But I had also gained things I never would have imagined: a purpose, a new perspective on life, and most importantly, the ability to forgive myself. Richard's email gave me the closure I didn't know I needed. It made me realise that, although I could never erase what I had done, I could move forward and try to make the world a little better. The following years were of continuous growth, both personal and professional. The Help Centre expanded, opening branches in other cities. I was invited to give talks at universities and conferences, sharing my experience and the lessons I had learned. One afternoon, while preparing a presentation, I received an unexpected call. It was Michael. His voice sounded aged, tired. He told me he had read my book and wanted to talk to me. I hesitated. Was I ready to face that part of my past? Finally, I agreed to see him. We met in a park, a public place where we would both feel safe. When I saw him, I barely recognized him. The charismatic and energetic man I remembered had disappeared, replaced by someone who seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. Our conversation was difficult, full of uncomfortable silences and unspoken words. Michael told me he had lost everything. His wife never forgave him. His children barely spoke to him. He had to retire early due to the scandal. He asked me for forgiveness for dragging me into that situation, for not being strong enough to end it before everything exploded. I listened in silence, feeling a mixture of compassion and a distant echo of the affection I once felt for him. When he finished speaking, I told him I forgave him, but that it was time for both of us to close that chapter of our lives forever. We said goodbye with a handshake. As I watched him walk away, I felt that a door to my past was definitively closing. I was no longer the same woman who had let herself be carried away by the excitement of a forbidden affair. I had grown, I had learned, and I was determined to use that experience to help others. As the years went by, my work became increasingly focused on prevention. I developed programs for high schools, teaching young people about healthy relationships, effective communication, and the importance of fidelity and respect in couples. In one of these workshops, I met Ellen, a young literature teacher who volunteered to help with the program. Ellen had a contagious energy and a passion for helping others that reminded me of myself when I was younger. Over time, Ellen and I became close friends. She became my confidant, the person I could talk openly with about my past without feeling judged. Through our long conversations, I began to see my story from a new perspective. One day, while we were having coffee after a particularly intense workshop, Ellen asked me a question that took me by surprise. "Anna, have you ever thought about having a relationship again?" The question left me speechless for a moment. The truth was that I had avoided thinking about romantic relationships for years. The fear of hurting someone again, or being hurt, had kept me away from love. "I don't know, Ellen," I answered honestly. "Sometimes I think I don't deserve another chance at love." Ellen looked at me with a mixture of understanding and determination. "Anna, you've dedicated the last years of your life to helping others heal and build healthy relationships. Don't you think you deserve the chance to apply everything you've learned in your own life?" Her words made me reflect deeply. Was I ready to open my heart again? The idea terrified and excited me at the same time. Little by little, with the support of Ellen and my friends from the centre, I began to open myself to the possibility of a new relationship. I started dating occasionally, first just as a friend, then on casual dates. Each step was a challenge, but also an opportunity to put into practice everything I had learned about honest communication and mutual respect. It was at a conference on couple psychology where I met Jake. He was a respected family therapist with a kind smile and eyes that seemed to understand pain without the need for words. Our connection was immediate, but we were both cautious. I told him my story on our third date, preparing myself to see him walk away. But Jake surprised me. Instead of judging me, he thanked me for my honesty and told me he admired how I had transformed my experience into something positive to help others. Our relationship grew slowly, built on a foundation of open communication and mutual trust. Jake had his own story of pain and growth, having lost his first wife to illness. Together, we learned to love again, with all the fears and vulnerabilities that entailed. 2 years after our first encounter, Jake proposed to me. It was a moment of joy mixed with fear. Was I really ready for this step? What if I failed again? I shared my fears with Jake, and together we worked through them. He reminded me that love wasn't a guarantee against pain, but that it was worth the risk. He promised me patience and understanding, and asked for the same in return. We got married in an intimate ceremony, surrounded only by our closest friends and family. Ellen was my maid of honor, her unwavering support by my side as I took this new step in my life. To my surprise, Richard and his new wife attended the wedding. It was a gesture of forgiveness and reconciliation that I never expected. Seeing him happy with his family filled me with deep gratitude. We had managed to overcome the pain and find peace. The years that followed were of continuous growth, both personal and professional. Jake and I combined our experiences to develop new couple therapy programs, focusing on helping couples overcome infidelity and rebuild trust. I never stopped sharing my story. Every time I spoke in public, whether at a small support meeting or at a large conference, I saw in the eyes of my audience the same pain I once felt, but also the hope of redemption. As I aged, I realized that my experience had become a testimony to how even the most serious mistakes can, with hard work and determination, be transformed into opportunities for growth and helping others. One day, as Jake and I were walking through the park near our house, I suddenly stopped, overwhelmed by a realization. "You know," I said to him, "I never thought I'd be happy again after what I did. But here I am with you, feeling more fulfilled than I ever imagined." Jake hugged me tightly and whispered in my ear, "You're an extraordinary woman, Anna. You've taken your pain and transformed it into love and help for others. I'm proud of you, and I love you for who you are, with all your past included." Those words resonated in my heart, reminding me how much my life had changed. From the woman who betrayed her husband with her father-in-law, to the counselor and author who helped others avoid making the same mistakes, I had come a long way. As we walked back home, I reflected on all the lessons I had learned. The importance of honesty and communication in any relationship. That a mistake, no matter how serious, doesn't have to define the rest of your life. That forgiveness, both towards oneself and others, is a long but liberating process. That it's always possible to redeem oneself and use painful experiences to grow and help others. That true love implies acceptance, even of the darkest parts of our past. My story is not a fairy tale. It's a story of mistakes, consequences, pain, and finally, redemption. It's a reminder that our actions have the power to destroy, but also to heal and rebuild. Today, as I write these words, I hope that my experience serves as a warning and as a beacon of hope. To those who are considering infidelity, I say, think about the consequences, not just for yourselves, but for everyone around you. The price is too high. And to those who have made mistakes and feel lost, I say, there is hope. The path to redemption is long and difficult, but it's possible. Every day is a new opportunity to be better, to heal, and to help others. My name is Anna, and this is my story. A story of betrayal, loss, but also of love, forgiveness, and second chances. It's a testimony that, even in our darkest moments, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel if we have the courage to look for it.